Hey, it's Tim with the University of Vinyl. Today I want to take a look at the long discographies of Bob Dylan and Neil Young. I want to key in on four different albums, two from each artist, that at the time that they were released, there was a lot of head scratching. There was some surprise among music critics. In particular, I'm going to take a look at the weird period from the mid 1980s up into the early 1990s for both artists. There's four albums I'm going to highlight today that are kind of curious as far as the choices that were made and when they were made, as to when the albums were released and the kind of creative decisions behind the albums. I think if you dig a little bit deeper into the albums, upon further listening, lots of time to reflect, they're very cool albums to have in your collection. They're worth having. None of these four albums could be ranked, by most people in the top five of their respective catalogs, but that doesn't mean they should be ignored or forgotten about. There are redeeming qualities on all of these albums, and that's what today's video is about. Taking a look at some of the curious choices in Bob Dylan and Neil Young's long discographies. Stay tuned. I've got four albums to talk about, and we're going to go in chronological order between the years of 1986 all the way up to 1992. So, what is that? A 6-year span. And first, I want to talk about Neil Young's Landing on Water. Now, the album was released in 1986. This was produced by Danny Kortchmar. Danny Kortchmar brought all of his electronic and synth toys to the recording party, and convinced Neil. And Neil can be easily convinced as far as technology is concerned, but he convinced Neil that this collection of songs sounded best with an amped up synth heavy feel. Drums all the way up to 11 provided by the great Steve Jordan. And it was really just those three guys doing the recording, and it was Neil on lead guitar, of course. There was Danny Kortchmar on synth and guitar also, and synth bass, and then the aforementioned Steve Jordan, currently of the Rolling Stones, played drum on this album. And this was an interesting collection of songs that Neil actually tried to record with Crazy Horse back in 1984. For whatever reason, he wasn't happy with the way the songs were sounding coming out. He scrapped that entire session. Maybe we'll get another, Landing on Water, version 1 eventually, knowing Neil and all of the reissues that he's doing. But this is an interesting album. I don't think it deserves as much derision as it has come to pass. Has come to pass with critics, and kind of the reputation it has. There are a lot of strong songs on here, including Hippie Dream, Weight of the World, Bad News Beat, I Got a Problem, Hard Luck Stories. This is worthwhile in seeking out. It's about a $8 or $10 record if you can find it in decent condition. Famously, released in 1986. This was during the Geffen years, so this is one of the handful of Neil Young albums released on Geffen in the 80s. This might have been the nail that broke David Geffen's back, because he quickly thereafter, after the release of this album, I think he basically filed a lawsuit against Neil Young. He had signed a huge contract with Neil back in, I think, 1980, and David Geffen's argument was, why don't you release some albums that sound like a Neil Young album? So this was the second to last album that was released on Geffen. There would be one more, 1987's Life, and that would be the end of the Geffen recording experiment between Neil and David. They've probably buried a hatchet since. But that is worth seeking out. It's an interesting sounding record. Much, much different than singer-songwriter Neil, or even, jammy, crazy horse sounding Neil. It's really a kind of a unique sounding record. Next up is the 1988 album by Neil Young and the Blue Notes, This Note's for You. Of course, This Note's for You, the title track, got a ton of airplay in the summer of 88, moving into the winter 88, 89. This is actually it was derived from an experiment that Neil had during the tour that was backing up the Life album. He had Crazy Horse out on the road with him, and apparently he was doing kind of a mini set whereby he would take Frank Pancho Sampedro would move from guitar to keyboards and try out some material that eventually ended up on This Note's for You. And according to Neil, the crowd loved it. There's a quote somewhere that I read where Neil was saying, the crowd wasn't yelling for a Southern Man every 15 minutes when he broke out this mini set of songs during the concerts. So that kind of spurred him on, and he went into the recording studio after that Life tour. Originally tried to do this with Crazy Horse and ended up bringing in Rick Rosas on bass guitar and Chad Cromwell on drums. He did move Frank Pancho Sampedro over to keyboards and brought in a full horn section, which included, curiously enough, Larry Craig, his guitar tech, was playing sax on the album. But this is a fine collection of songs. There is a stunning standout song, in my opinion. It's Coop Deville. It's an emotional, bluesy, jazzy take by Neil. He's probably playing, it sounds like a hollow-bodied white Gretsch Falcon, which we know that he used all over the On the Beach album. Anyway, I'm sure he was also using Old Black, but this is a really great take on a bluesy, Memphis-y sound with that horn section. And Neil is sounding fantastic as far as vocals are concerned. This is one of the best sounding records that I have in my collection. It was mastered at the Mastering Lab by Doug Sachs. It sounds great. And it's highly recommended, but a little bit forgotten down along the discography. Not a lot of people talk about this. If you can find it out there, pick it up. I found this recently for $12, near mint condition. They're out there. In September 1990, Bob Dylan released Under the Red Sky. Now, Under the Red Sky is a very curious album. It was, first of all, it only came out less than a year after Oh Mercy. So 1989's Oh Mercy. Critics loved that album. It was a huge return to form for Dylan, who was also involved in the Traveling Wilburys during that same time period. So very kind of fertile ground for Dylan. And what happened is he had some time between tours. He decided he had enough material for a new album and wanted to work with Don and David Was. Of course, Don Was famously at that point in time had just resurrected Bonnie Raitt's career and was kind of the hot hand in the industry at the time. So Bob decided to work with Don Was and brought him in for sessions. He also kind of put together a core band, a powerhouse band. There was a ton of talent on this album, including David Crosby on background vocals, Kenny Aronoff played drums on every track. Bass guitar, it was alternating between Randy Jackson and Don Was. He brought in a string of guitarists, including Slash, Stevie Ray Vaughan, who absolutely burns on one song I'm going to talk about in a minute. George Harrison threw down some slide guitar on one or two songs. Who else did we have on here? Bruce Hornsby on piano, Robin Ford on guitar as well, Elton John on piano, almost kind of a who's who, David Lindley, slide guitar. And this album contains some strange songs, but I think the two strongest songs on the album were actually leftovers from the Oh Mercy sessions that Dylan wanted to try to re-record. And one of those is God Knows. He brought in Stevie Ray Vaughan on lead guitar on this song, and it sounds absolutely incredible. Dylan has got a fantastic, urgent delivery, and it's great lyrics. It's a good song. Power drumming by Kenny Aronoff. My only complaint with that song is there is an early fade out in the middle of the final verse of the song. I need to dig and find out. I think probably on Telltale Signs, the bootleg series collection, Telltale Signs, there may be several other takes of that track, and that's something I'm actually looking for on vinyl. It's hard to find. But that is God Knows. Now, the other one was Born in Time, and I have heard several different versions of that were on Telltale Signs. David Crosby on backup vocals sounds fantastic. This was, I think Crosby had been just recently out of prison for his drug bust, and Dylan threw him a bone and asked him to come in and do some recording with him. Other songs on this album include Cats in the Well, which was played a lot in concert all the way up into the 2000s. TV Talkin' Song. Of course, the album led off with the kind of innocuous Wiggle Wiggle, and this album had some horrible reviews. It harkened back to self-portrait days as far as reviews were concerned, but in time, and if you listen to it, upon further review, it's a great album. It's not easy to find. I actually had to go to Discogs and found a near mint copy for reasonable money, $22, I think. And it was a hole that I had in my Dylan collection, and happy to have it in the fold now. After the poor reviews of Under the Red Sky, although Dylan, we don't think he pays a ton of attention to reviews, but in 1992 he took a severe left turn with his next release and came out with Good As I've Been to You, which is a very interesting kind of return to folk and blues. It is Bob accompanied by himself with acoustic guitar and harmonica, and that is it. He, in the summer or spring of 92, in my research, he actually did an entire 2-week recording session with David Bromberg. Bromberg goes back all the way with Dylan to Self-Portrait, and helped basically assemble Greatest Hits Volume 2 with Dylan. They did an extensive recording session, recorded a lot of old standards, folk songs, blues in Chicago. And Dylan was in a hurry. He finished that session, left before he heard the kind of final mix downs of the takes that were recorded, went out on a European tour, returned back to Malibu, California, his home base, listened to some of the final mixes of the recordings that were done in Chicago with Bromberg, scrapped everything, and went into his garage studio and over a 2-week time period recorded about a dozen songs that ended up on this album released in 1992. And this thing features some incredible acoustic guitar work by Dylan. There's a legend out there that this was kind of a slapdash situation. It was thrown together and quickly, recorded. Now, Dylan did not have the best technology in his garage studio, but this is a good sounding album, basically because it's so sparsely produced. So it's Dylan himself, his acoustic guitar and harmonica here and there. As far as I can tell, there's not a lot of vocal overdubs that were done. I do think he spent considerable amount of time perfecting these guitar parts because they sound fantastic. And Dylan was not known in the 80s and 90s for his, incredible acoustic guitar playing. So I think he actually spent quite a bit of time honing these arrangements and putting them down. But there are a number of fantastic songs on here. Frankie and Johnny, You're Gonna Quit Me, Diamond Joe, of course Froggy Went A-Courtin' is the last song on side 2. Hard to find. I was lucky enough, I got this from the Coleman collection. Norman Masloff, Mazzy as he is known in the VC, had a Dylan bundle that I was lucky enough to pick up. So this is from the Coleman collection is where this album came from. So happy to have this in the collection. Hey, that's today's video. A quick look at the mid-1980s into the early 1990s, specifically looking at Bob Dylan and Neil Young's recording output and 4 interesting albums that were released in that 6-year time frame. Thanks a lot, everybody, for watching. I will be back soon with a new video. Please like and subscribe. If you have not subscribed yet, I would appreciate it. We will see you soon. Have a fantastic day.